Welcome guys. Today we're joined by Josh Staples, a VR enthusiast and realist. Today we're going to be doing a really quick tour of show and tell of different VR hardware that's out there on the marketplace that you guys can buy or develop software for. So we're going to go through them from cheapest to most expensive and kind of review what the options are. So Josh, do you mind sharing with our audience what hardware we've got on the table today?
Right, so I will say the cheapest hardware you get is the Google Cardboard. The Google Cardboard is literally a piece of cardboard laser cut in such a way that you can fold it up so it makes something that fits a phone. What we're looking at right here though is the Samsung Gear VR. You notice you actually open it up, you can slide your Samsung phone in, fold it down, and then you have essentially two lenses where you can actually look through left lens and right lens. And then what will actually happen on your phone is it'll display inside this sort of holder right here where your phone is. It'll be one eyeball and the other eyeball, and there are different camera positions you can see. I think this is about 70 bucks. It worked great. You definitely need a higher end phone though, just for the actual hardware and software to work properly.
So if you've got a Samsung phone, is that right?
I had a Samsung S7, I believe, and that worked. That was recommended, but something definitely higher quality, not like an S5 if you have an older school tech. What we also have here is the Daydream. This is Google's go-to phone. I actually have a Google Pixel, and they actually suggest using the Google Pixel for this. This is a much higher quality than Samsung Gear VR. The Pixel was actually made to work with this sort of Daydream approach, right? And Daydream's their catch-all for their VR approach. What also comes with this is a small controller, which is really neat. It's motion controlled. If you want to throw a fishing rod or throw a fishing line, for example, the fishing rod, you can do that. You can point at stuff, interact with it inside the VR environment. Just like the Samsung Gear VR, this again takes the phone, folds up into the actual device, then you can just slip it over your head, and there's two lenses, left and right, to actually view.
Is that similarly priced to?
Very, very similar. Yeah, all this tech is very similar. The Cardboard, Gear, VR, and the Daydream are all very similar priced. You can also go out and find 3D printed devices that will just allow your phone to be folded up. You can use lower quality phones for these devices, but what will happen is if you start moving around real fast, the frame rate won't be able to keep up with your head movement, right? Additionally, with the Pixel, I think there are really high-end motion controllers in here that have really, really high clock speeds that allow to detect for left and right, up and down, translation and rotation movement very quickly.
That's why you need a more recent Samsung?
Yes, exactly. You need that higher end tech, the motion controls to actually be able to detect your head movement. If you don't get that higher end tech, what happens is the frame rate will get real choppy and it will actually lag your vision. And when that happens, it screws with your inner ear and actually makes you feel sick. This has been one of the big nagging problems with VR, especially with older tech, is that sort of lag.
So these each are around 70 bucks. Can you buy them on Amazon or Newegg, or what types of websites do you recommend?
Just about anywhere. I just Google it, buy the cheapest one. That's probably your best option, honestly.
Okay, so let's say I have a Samsung S7. I buy the Daydream.
You buy the Gear VR, probably.
I buy the Gear VR with the Samsung phone. What do I do next to start playing VR games?
There's some applications you'd have to download on your phone. I think it's like Gear VR or whatever. And then it just immediately starts working. It has a near field kind of communication that allows it to detect that it's actually being set up.
This is through the Android App Store? Or?
Right, yeah, right. Through the Android App Store. And then I think there's an internal, this is a while ago, there's an internal app store for the Samsung too where they can take your credit card and you can start buying asteroids or whatever else you like.
I know this is an opinionated question, but what's a good first software for somebody to try downloading through the Gear VR store or the Daydream store?
You know, I would pick something just really simple, like an asteroids type game, something where you just interact and click. You can do some 3D videos or VR videos. You can actually go to YouTube and play some VR videos there as well. I believe Facebook supports them as well. And that's where you're actually in a video moving around. And what it allows you to do is to move your head around. So say if you wanted to, if you're not interested in gaming, if you wanted to travel internationally using the VR approach, you could maybe sit on top of the Sistine Chapel and look around, or North Schwanstein or something like that. So a lot of neat options there. And really it's just to sort of get an idea of what it's capable of.
So we've covered the sub $100 budget. what are the higher budget hardware that our audience can buy?
Sure. So we have a couple options here. I'm going to start off with the Oculus Rift. Oculus Rift was purchased by Facebook a while back. They've since been sued by, I think, ZeniMax and lost because Carmack and Lucker Palmy cheated when they were setting this up. I think they lost to the tune individually of $250 million.
These are the executives / co-founders of Oculus before they were acquired.
Yep,
by Facebook.
it's a good product. One great thing about it is it has the integrated headphone support, whereas the HTC Vive doesn't. It also has a couple options for controllers. Initially, when the Oculus Rift came out, it was only offered with, I believe, keyboard support. I'm not sure. It's a long time ago. But also the game controller, gamepad controller. And more recently, they have these Oculus, I guess they're called Touch or something like that, which is an integrated controller for both your hands. You can move around. It looks like a normal gamepad, controllers, stick, joystick, triggers, everything else.
So we covered the sub $100 range. What will this set you back, or is it generally available for buying?
Yeah, so especially I think on Amazon, I purchased this off of Amazon for I think $400, and it comes with both controllers, the actual headset, and a couple. I'm not sure what they call these, but they're the actual detectors that Facebook uses or Oculus Rift uses to actually detect head movement and the like. This sets you back about $400, so it's a relatively cheap system. I will say that with these higher end systems though, you need a pretty good graphics card to go along with this. So this is just the hardware for the VR device. You might need like a $500, $600 graphics card to go along to support these devices.
So unlike the $70 Gear VR and Daydream, this will set you back $400, but you also need a laptop or desktop with a $500 in the ballpark of a $500 graphics card.
Minimum, yeah. I believe I paid $800 for a 1080 GTX when it first came out, so kind of a bummer. But
so you're telling me that there's a reason that you need the really high graphics card, high quality graphics card. So for the people who are used to playing games on Steam or World of Warcraft or Dota, what reason is there for VR to have higher hardware requirements?
Sure. So whenever you're actually rendering a scene, for example, when I use my Vive, I'm rendering the scene for my monitor over at my desktop behind me, but I'm also rendering the scene twice more for each eyeball, right? So at that point, I've rendered the scene 3 times each second for a single frame. So it's a much higher sort of hardware power requirement, calculation requirement, processing requirement than actually rendering for a single frame on or 2 frames on an actual Gear or a Daydream.
So it's a standard 2D video game. It's one scene being rendered by your graphics card, while with any of these VR devices, there's three screens. Although for the Daydream and the Gear VR, there's 2.
Two screens. So it's for each eyeball. And the reason you have to render these screens is because the way you get the stereoscopic effect is that the cameras, which are your eyeballs in this case, are each rendered a certain distance apart, specifically the distance between your pupils, right? And that's what gives you the stereoscopic effect, because your eyeballs get different scenes and interprets the scene, and all of a sudden you're in a full 3D environment.
So the Oculus Rift device with the handheld controllers and the motion detector sensor is $400. Graphics card is $500, and then the desktop or laptop that has the graphics card in it is probably an additional $800 to $1,200. So
yeah, it's a good ballpark estimate.
All in this, it sounds like this would cost around $2,000. So we went from $70 to $2,000 very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
So the way that I introduced Josh was as a VR realist. So a lot of our audience probably isn't ready to drop $2,000 on the Oculus plus a serious desktop or laptop with the graphics card. So maybe share for our audience your expectations as an enthusiast and a hobbyist for how or which of these devices on our table right here will be the first to be adopted and the first that our audience will encounter in real life.
Sure. So I suspect what all of you will encounter first will be a Google Cardboard, either in education or in a classroom, some kind of environment where you have 30 students, they need 30 devices, and you want to teach them about the solar system, for example, or maybe medicine or the body or something like that. That'll probably be your first experience. The real limitation for the Vive and the Oculus Rift is actually space, right? You can sit at your desk laptop, or you can set it at your desk with the Oculus Rift and play some kind of flying game, a flight sim, or anything else like that. But the real awesome power of these products, these devices, is actually having something like room space. And this is what HTC Vive excels at. And that's where you actually have some space mapped out where you can actually go in, stand up, move around, and interact. And there's a cost associated with that, right? Like I had to set it up in my garage, for example, because I don't have a room here in San Francisco to actually set it up in. Additionally, there's, of course, the space cost, but there's also the hardware cost and the time cost. There's a lot of costs that actually sort of step up right here that make it a little bit harder to get into unless you're a true enthusiast. Additionally, there's no killer app, right? There's no real AAA title for the Vive or for Facebook that would really drive sales right now. They're coming, but honestly, they're not here yet.
There's no Call of Duty, Counter-Strike.
Yep.
I mean, I'm listing off my favorite games. But
yep. Yeah, exactly. And they are coming, but again, like, is your mom going to park outside? Is your dad going to park outside? Are you going to give up a bedroom from a family member to actually set this thing up? Are you going to move all the furniture out when you want to set it up? So there are a lot of constraints there. You actually have to have the enthusiasm to do this, to demonstrate the actual VR experience properly.
So for a large portion of our audience that doesn't have an Android phone but rather has an iPhone, what are their options for playing VR games, if not jumping up to the $2,000 that it'll set them back to get an Oculus? Right.
So I think probably more interesting right now is Apple just released something called the ARKit. AR standing for Augmented Reality Kit. This is similar to what the Magic Leap will be, which I guess we haven't talked about yet. The ARKit allows you to go out into the real world and, say, play Space Invaders on the street or something like that. This is a brand new, I think it came out a couple months ago. That is what someone with an iPhone would be doing right now, playing these augmented reality games. Something like Pokemon Go, for example, where you can actually go out into the real world and play it instead of being confined to a garage in your basement.
So as opposed to covering your eyes,
yeah,
augmented reality is distinguished from virtual reality in that you have visibility to your surroundings, but there are elements that screens superimpose on what is in the background of your line of sight.
Exactly. It's a superimposition of the object, say a Pokemon or anything else, on what you can actually see. That being said, you are actually looking through the window of the iPhone.
So, at this point, I think it would be a great idea to have a live demo. So Josh is going to do his best to show me what motion sickness feels like on one of these devices. So this is the game that we're going to give a try and see whether we can make ourselves sick.
Yes.
Like Josh was describing, this is his desktop that has the $500 graphics card. That's important if you want to have the video games that you play on VR rendering adequately fast. And here's Josh playing the game. I'll give it a try in just a sec.
So this is Max playing a game called Windlands. Windlands is essentially like a Tarzan kind of game where you have these little grappling hooks and you move around the map swinging to and fro, trying to get to different points. It's like a climber game. Whenever this first came out, and I think this was like a DK2 game, if not earlier, one of the problems you have is this movement he's doing right now. It's very fluid and everything else. What he's seeing, though, is sort of the world moving by him, and his brain processes that, but there's no inertia associated with that actual movement, and it makes you very unsteady. You can't really play this very long without feeling very sick. And if you actually notice Max, he's very tense in his legs. He's not moving very fast. Everything's very kind of awkward. This is one of the problems that VR introduces, this kind of lack of movement, yet your brain's sensing movement. So one of the solutions they have is something called teleporting. And that's where you actually point at somewhere on the ground or the map in front of you, and it'll actually transport you there in a short amount of time. It kind of blurs between your previous location and your next location. To keep people from quickly skipping across the map, they constrain how far you can actually teleport. Additionally, they sort of time box the teleportation process. You can only teleport once every 3 seconds or the like. So again, this is Max playing Windlands. Now I'll actually show you what Windlands looks like.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So I guess the most sickening aspect of it is just running across flat ground and moving at higher speeds. Whew, that makes me feel queasy. So thanks, Josh. That's been a pretty fucking insane introduction to real life VR hardware. I'm hoping we can do this again very soon.
Sure.
Maybe we can make some kind of series out of it with the different games. But if you guys have any questions for Josh, send them either add them in the comments or try and reach me through the website at theaccidentalengineer.com. Talk to you guys soon.
Great, Matt. Thanks.